Three. All right, it is recording. So today we have a very special person with us. Mann is an elder law, probate, and estate planning attorney who has been admitted to the U.S. Supreme Court, the U.S. Tax Court, and all of California's state courts. In addition to her private solo law practice, she has actively helped to protect the public, assist clients who cannot afford a lawyer, and improve the profession by serving on the boards of the State Bar of California, the Orange County Bar Association, and the Community Legal Aid of Southern California, as well as by accepting probate court appointed cases. She's also one of the first female lawyers in Orange County, as the flyer stated. She's an amazing person. I could go on, but we'll let her talk and let me spotlight her for everybody so everyone can see
her. Oh my goodness, I'm big.
And Madison will start with asking the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so before you decided to become a lawyer, you spent a sizable amount of time working as a librarian. I was wondering what motivated the transition between working as a librarian and deciding to attend law school?
Necessity. My husband, we were living in Hawaii at the time, in Honolulu. My husband was the head of the computer department for the city and county there, and he took a new job in San Diego. So San Diego was lovely too, and we moved there, but I couldn't get a job in a library. I was doing substitute work when people went on vacations. I'd go in and run a public library branch. And my husband had 3 children from a previous marriage, so we in those days, this is 1979. I'm sorry, it was 81 when we moved to San Diego. He was paying $1,000 a month in child support, so I had to work. Anyway, I couldn't get a job. I was doing this substitute work, for very low wages. So I decided to go to law school. And the reason that I did is I had been working, before I left Hawaii, our son was young, he was 5 when we moved to California. I was sharing a job with another woman, and in those days that was very forward thinking, nobody else did it. But I had a full-time job at the regular pay, only I got half and another gal had half, and we got all the benefits. I got half vacation and so forth. So I knew that I could do it because I had to audit the legal research class, and I aced the final exam on that. And I knew I was as smart as those guys who came into the library who couldn't find anything. Anyway, so I did. I applied to Western State. Well, I checked out several law schools there. However, the other 2 schools discriminated against people who had to work, because if you went part-time, you had to work on the weekends, go to law school on the weekends and on an evening, and which I couldn't do with my family schedule. So Western State, I applied to them, and I got in. Actually, I'm going on to the next part about steps, so you might want to ask me that next question.
I can ask you the next question. What were some of the steps you took to get into law school? And what advice might you give to college students here who are interested in attending law school?
Okay, so probably none of you are in the same place that I was at the time. I had 20 years experience as a librarian when I decided to go to law school. Plus I had the master's degree in library science by that time, as well as while I was working in Hawaii, I would take a class, an evening class once a week. And over the years, I got a second master's in American Studies, which was a study of the U.S. through history and literature, which some of the employees, places that I worked, paid the employees tuition to take a class. So that's what it is. I have some notes here. Let me just look at my glasses, put my glasses on so I can look at them, because I don't want to be overly speak too much. So the steps. Well, first I had to take the LSAT, and my husband had this thing to go to in San Francisco. We were from San Diego. He is from San Francisco, so he has relatives up there. So I went with him. I didn't even study the weekend before, so I took it cold. But for me, taking that type of exam that you can't really study for was very relaxing. I figured, well, I'll just do the best I can, and I did. I actually did really well. but a lot of it had to do with my previous background too. Um, so as I started to tell you, the other three law schools discriminated against people who were poor because they wouldn't allow me to go half time in the day. So I went to Western State and did well there. I went there my first year, and then Jerry said, "We have to move. I'm going to have to look for a new job because the people he was the head of the computer department for the county of San Diego. He said, people are taking kickbacks in the government here because I can just tell how they favor certain ones when they do these, go out for bids." So after the first year, I transferred up to we moved to Fullerton, and I transferred to Western State up here. So it was perfect that I was going there because I didn't lose any credits. So I think now you can, oh, the advice part. Okay, advice to you. Well, if you're an undergraduate now, it's totally different, the kind of advice I have. Now, some of you may be older and have work experience or other kinds of training that is helpful. I think all of that they look at. But the first thing you do, you're in school now, you do the best you can to get the best grades you can, because that makes a difference. If you have a master's or another kind of advanced degree, that's helpful. If you've had paid work, and many of us had to work while we were in school, or if you did volunteer work, I think they look at that as well. And as you know, even before I was a lawyer, I did a lot of, or you may have surmised, I did a lot of volunteer work. It's just has to do with my own family background. And then you need to study for the LSAT, and if you possibly can, take one of those review classes. I think that would probably be helpful. And,
Okay.
and that's it. They want
Yeah.
usually they want a well-rounded person. I heard somebody about to ask me another question.
Yeah, no, but I definitely am interested in all of the things that you have to say. I personally am interested in going into law school, so hearing what your advice that you have is extremely helpful. Okay, so I'll move on to the next question then, which is, what were some of the obstacles you had to face as a woman at law school, studying a field that is primarily male-dominated?
Well, again, I was fortunate to have chosen Western State because they were a different kind of school. Well, first of all, as I told you, they would accept part-time students and let us take classes whenever we wanted. So it wasn't I didn't feel like it was a discriminatory situation. But I found it very interesting and challenging. And I never faced any kind of discrimination as to being a female, because at least half the people there were females. A lot of them were women who were married to doctors or lawyers or other professionals, and who were now wanting to go out and work because their children were older, and so they went to law school. So a lot of us were not that young. And I was a good student. I was a law review editor-in-chief. I had the best brief in moot court. By the way, I took moot court because one of my professors was so scary. I was terrified all the time of being called on. I thought I would mostly do research and writing, like appellate law and that kind of thing, where you didn't have to be in court a lot. I learned the hard way. Now it's just nothing. You go into court, they all know who you are and know that you're always well prepared. But in those days, it was very scary. I actually used to say a prayer when I first started, before I went into the courtroom, so I would relax. But, I'm good at studying, I'm good at reading, and that's mostly what you have to do, is you have to read cases and then be prepared to be called on and struggle through that. But Western State was fortunate because it was different than most law schools. In those days, there were I think, quotas at lots of law schools for how many women they let in, or how many scholarship students and so forth. And now most law schools are equal at women, and some actually now have more women than men. And this is just from anecdotes that I hear from other people. I tend to like to talk to young new lawyers and help them out if I can. And like I said, at Western State, many of the people were either second career or just older people. And we did have younger guys who would go out, and I enjoyed going to the beer drinking parties that my younger classmates invited us to. We were just one of the kids to them. Maybe not. We left early, usually. Let's see. So in that respect, I guess I led a charmed life. Okay, I think the next question.
All right. Thank you for sharing that experience. I think it's definitely very enlightening because we just hear stuff about law school, but we don't know what it's actually to be in it. Um, so moving on to your career now, you have received multiple awards for accepting pro bono cases. What was your motivation for undertaking all of this work for no monetary compensation?
I've been struggling on how to answer you on that question. You know, most people think I came from a family where it was understood we'd go to college. I wasn't. My maiden name is Gondrella. I'm 1/4 Italian, 1/2 French, and the other part German and Spanish. But my grandparents that I knew were the Gondrella grandparents, and my grandmother was French, and her family first came to Louisiana in 1719, if you would believe. When she married my grandfather, she lost her citizenship because he came as a child from Italy, and his parents and he never became U.S. citizens. And she had to then reapply for it. She was bilingual, but she refused to speak French anymore after that because she wanted everybody to know she really was an American. I'm going into all of this, and I probably shouldn't. But we didn't have much. My daddy dropped out of school in 8th grade. My mother in 10th grade, and they were poor. My daddy's family, my grandfather had a 100-acre farm, and so they had more. Um, but I knew my parents also had 7 children in 8 years, and I'm the oldest. I knew that if they ever had to hire a lawyer, they would not know where to go. They wouldn't be able to afford it. And I guess it's because of that I understand about, and there were lots of people who were much poorer than we were. We were not really poor. My family bought a home, you know, and we always had new shoes for Christmas, for Easter, and for school, and you know, outfits to go along with that. So we were never paupers. There were some people much worse off. And I knew if my parents had to hire a lawyer, they never would be able to do that. So one time I went with a group from my church to the place in Fullerton where they serve food to the, you know, people who are homeless and other people, poor people who come in to eat. It's at another church. It wasn't the church that I belonged to, but we volunteered to serve. So I cooked, I cleaned, you know, I took my jacket off and then put it on when I was done. And I thought, you know, with the time that I put in there, I can think of all the wills I could have done for HIV positive people. You know, that I did do that for a while and later. And it's important because what little they have, they want to make sure it goes to the right people, their families or their friends or whoever. And anyway, that I could do pro bono work that nobody else could do because they don't have that training and that experience. And that's when I decided then to volunteer with the Public Law Center, and I'm now on the board of the Community Legal Aid, which is a formal legal aid society, which helps people who can't afford lawyers. But even you know, when I worked for the firm, which was hard because you have longer hours. When I first got out of school, I worked for a firm, and I always found some little thing that I could do to be helpful to others who were less fortunate because I was so lucky in my own life. And then once my son went off to college, boy, I really put in time. um, so the kinds of things that I've done is I told you about the wills and powers of attorney for the HIV positive people. Interestingly, when I was president of the Orange County Barristers, which was the young lawyers group, I was a middle-aged woman, but I was president of that group for a year. We always had a little project that we did. So I wanted to do that, help the HIV people, but there were only two women, two of us middle-aged women on the board, and the rest of them were young male lawyers. They would not vote to do the HIV people. They thought that was, you know, not, most of them were from big firms and they thought it would be frowned upon by their firms. So we ended up helping burn victims in that particular time. But then I got to do that on my own. I've also obtained conservatorships for parents of mentally disabled children who are turning 18. Uh, I don't know if you know this, but when if you have a disabled child when they're 18, they're adults and the doctors can't tell you anything about their cases. It's all private. And all of you who are over 18 need an advanced healthcare directive to name someone, your parents or your significant other or somebody to make that decision. And if any of you want, you can email me and I'll send you a form. You can fill it out yourself and have it witnessed. But anyway, back to this. Let's see, what else did I do? Well, the other thing that I do now, I'm not taking any current cases that I have to file in court, but I have 10 where I'm court appointed. Some of those are for people who are indigent. Others are for where I will actually get some pay eventually. But I'm appointed by the judge who does the restraining orders for seniors again who are being abused by somebody. And I have quite a few of those because that lawyer, that judge I knew when she was a lawyer who did the same kind of work I did. We're called elder law attorneys because we advise seniors, but most of what I do other than the court work is just doing wills and trusts, powers of attorney, those kinds of documents, or helping people where they don't know what to do because now mom or dad has dementia and can't live at home. And so I can help them figure out how to deal with that. And I would say most of my clients now are middle-class people, other than the pro bono ones. I think that's all I have in my notes, and unless you have some questions about that.
No, that it all sounds amazing. It's incredible, all of the work that you've done and the amazing things you've done to really help people. I think that was one of the coolest things about reading your resume, was seeing all of the amazing work that you've put in to try and assist like other people and really make their lives better. And I just thought that was amazing. Like, I have so much respect for all of the things that you have done. It's amazing. But I don't have any questions now. If there are any questions in the audience about the work that ProMan has done, just put it in the chat if you want to write it down somewhere, and we'll go over them at the end after we're done with our pre-written questions.
One other thing I would like to say before you ask my next question.
Yeah.
Another reason is I charge $300 an hour now, which is cheap. I used to be $250, and a group of young lawyers, because I do these court-appointed cases, and sometimes you have to verbally ask, okay, in your restraining order now, I'll ask for 2 hours because that's what time I put in interviewing the person and coming to court. And a group of the younger lawyers came and said, "You've been a lawyer a lot longer than any of us, and your fees are much cheaper, and it's very embarrassing for us because we ask for higher fees." Of course, this was a young guy who had 5 kids. So anyway, I raised it through 300, but even so, a lot of my clients are what I call the millionaires next door because they own a house in Fullerton that's worth like $800,000, and they have a retirement and they have some income and savings. But so I often, as I said, give discounts to people, but I don't tell these guys at court that. Not that I've been to court, we just do court like this now. It's difficult because court is very formal and you're geared up for it. Whereas I'm sitting here sometimes in my jeans, but with my jacket on for the court. And actually I don't have jeans on, I have suit type pants on today for you guys. Anyway, but what I make as a lawyer is so much more than I ever made as a librarian, where I worked almost as hard. It didn't require quite as much training and so forth. But, to me, it's a lot. And my husband and I are fairly frugal, but we have traveled all over the world since he's retired. I've been taking 2 trips out of the country a year, even though I'm still working, because I work around that. And, but, we were in Vietnam last year in February, just before we got out of the Hong Kong. We had a connection in Hong Kong to come back to LAX, and we got out 2 days before they closed the airport. We could have been stranded there, but we had to cancel the trip we would have taken in August. We didn't take one in February, and so anyway, we live a good life, but we're not big into having fancy cars. And I drive a Buick, but to me that's fancy. Okay, so next.
That's amazing though, and I definitely like what you said about travel is fantastic. I think whatever job I get when that I go into, like whatever field I end up going into, I definitely want to have the capacity to travel. That sounds incredible. Okay, so the next question, you mentioned this a little bit, but you talked about all of the obligations and stuff that you've done. And when reading through your resume, Urooj and I noticed that you take part in a lot of committees. You're either, the chair or you're a member, right? And we were just wondering what were some of the motivating factors that led you to undertake so much additional work in committees?
Well, usually I got a lot of benefit out of them. For example, I'm part of the Elder Law Committee, the Trusted Estates Committee, the Conservatorship Committee, and I've been on other. When I first was a lawyer, I did. Well, I don't want to go into that. But anyway, I always joined something where the substance was part of my practice because they then have inexpensive classes that you can go to because we have a certain amount we have to do for the state bar to keep our license active, and so they would be free, or there would be luncheons where they cost $30. They're not that cheap, but for me at times I would pay and have the lunch because then I didn't have to then have lunch later, and the other thing is sometimes I got so much good advice from somebody as part of some committee. I thought, well, now, I feel like I owe them. So now that I'm more experienced, I'll join that committee and help them out. Some of the substantive ones. But others were just like, there were various committees related to women because when I first started, there weren't quite as many women, and a lot of women still don't make partnership in firms. But partly it's because if you have children, it's very hard then to take time off and then get back on the track. Um, and I was a solo practitioner after my first year in practice, and you're by yourself. You don't have anybody to bounce ideas off of. More recently, I shared this. The gal who had the law office next to me, we would go in and she'd say, "Can I bounce something off of you?" Or I would do the same for her. We had similar practices, and so that was a help. But a lot of times you learn things, or you find out who the people are that if somebody comes to you and you don't do that kind of work, where you could refer them, because not all lawyers are as good or as honest as we would like. Um, and usually I never volunteered to be the chair or the co-chair or the president or whatever. Usually I work so hard, people would come and say, "Oh, you have to do this," or nobody else wanted to do it. That's what happened I'm the president of the League of Women Voters, which is an outside group. But I was president previously, and I thought, okay, I've done that. But in 2020, it's a 2-year term. In 2020, nobody wanted to run. They all want to be on the work committees. And so I said, well, I'll run if somebody runs with me, because we can't have a committee running this group. It would be disastrous. You'd never get anywhere. So, but then nobody would run. So I've been doing it by myself. And I have to say, I am overwhelmed by the emails. They copy me on every committee, copies me on every email. And then we have something called ILO, which is the interleague group, and various ones. But I'm giving back because I got a lot out of that, and I probably will mention that later about the League of Women Voters. But you wanted to go. Let's go on to the next question.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate, because we also I feel like it's a general theme with students too. Like we just jump on things because nobody else wants to do it. But it's so awesome to see that you're also doing that. So we can definitely, it's one thing we can relate on. um, so the next question we have is, you have clearly spent a sizable amount of time advocating for women's rights. Clearly you're the president of League of Women Voters of North Orange County. What advice would you have for college-age female students?
Well, I'd like to talk about what my motivation was. I think a lot of it depends on your background, and I think I've told you a little bit about my family. I don't think I told you this though. Did I tell you about my grandma Kazoo, the French descent and bilingual? Did I tell you that? I think I mentioned that.
Yes, you mentioned it
Well,
briefly.
that story stuck with me that, somehow you could lose, obviously by the time I came along, the laws were very different. But that always made a deep impression on me. And then in my family, which I told you before, French and Italian, all the women raised the children, worked at home. My daddy dropped out of school, my mother dropped out, and they both were very smart. And what they wanted, all of their six girls, all of their seven children would graduate from high school, and their son would go to college. So I was the oldest. Well, I bargained with my father to allow me to take a scholarship, and he made me promise that I would work in the summer to help out because he contributed a little bit, but mostly my tuition and all was paid, but my housing and food wasn't paid. So he paid part from my room, my meal ticket for the weekdays. I had to work so I could have food on the weekend and other things. Um, well, my brother started in my senior year. He started college. He got a football scholarship, a basketball scholarship to a school, another college, a, about a 2-hour drive from New Orleans. And he was so homesick he dropped out after the first year. So he eventually got a junior college certificate. He went 2 years and got a certification, but he was the only one who didn't finish. Most of the girls did. One of my sisters died when she was a senior in college, and the only one who never went to college was the youngest. She got pregnant and got married very young. But when I was growing up, I never knew any women who worked outside the home other than teachers, nurses, and clerks in grocery stores or drugstores or whatever. And when I told them that I had qualified for the two scholarships, as our counselor told me, and I wanted to take the one farthest away from home because I knew I'd never be able to study at home with all the noise and all those younger children. Um, they were horrified. You would have think I wanted to tell them I wanted to go hook on Bourbon Street or something. What? Leave your parents? You have to live with your parents, and when you get married, we'll give you to your husband. So anyway, as I said, then it was easy for the rest of them to go eventually. Um, and they did let me, I have to say, they worried about it. And my mother used to say to people, I hear her saying that, well, college made you bad. So I said to my mother once in front of her friend, Mother, I was probably one of the few people who graduated, women who graduated, who was a virgin. And she didn't mean it that way. It was because I would speak up more at home. I wouldn't just sort of defer uh, to what they wanted. I would say, well, I didn't argue and yell or anything. That's the way they talk to each other, but I didn't do that. Um, but I think I became more assertive once I had that education. And then, of course, the travel thing. I went to Korea to work and things like that. They really worried about that. But anyway, many women lawyers, especially in law firms and certain practice areas, are discriminated against, I think, still. And partly it has to do with those family obligations, or they don't go out and play golf with the clients and things like that. That's easier for men to do, and it's often difficult for them. And not only that, a lot of women end up having to help out their aging parents. And sometimes they're treated differently in courts. Although over my career, this has changed dramatically. But I can remember when I was with the Women Lawyers Group, we would go do these programs. We'd have local lawyers speak about conditions there, and for women and others. Uh, that now I think it's really different. We have a lot more women lawyers, and I think you know I remember we were in Upland doing a program, and these women, the people who spoke said it's great in our county. All the judges are fair. A lot of them the women did family law. And so afterwards, these young lawyers came up and said, "Well, in Judge so and so's court, we have to find out where we can wear pants and where we can have to wear skirts, because this one judge won't let any woman in with pants, wearing pants and things like that." But as I said, I think that's really changing. We have more women on the bench, more female judges. right now in the probate court where my practice is limited to these days, that we have 2 male and 2 female judges. The presiding judge is a male, but the previous one was a female. And then over the whole Orange County court system, we previously had a female judge as the presiding judge, and right now we have a male, and then the assistant is a female, so she will move up next year too. So things have really changed quite a lot uh, since I became a lawyer in '65. I think that's enough of that. I could go on for a long time, and I'm usually more formal when I speak, but it's different with Zoom. If you were there in person, and I like that you're smiling a little bit and shaking your head, Joe, and other people and Urooj. So, okay, next, shoot.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to say though, I also appreciate kind of the informalness of Zoom. It's easier to have conversations like this in a more informal setting. So I really appreciate like you being really normal with us and just kind of telling us your experience, because I think that's kind of what we all wanted to hear. So I appreciate the you being informal with us today. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you the next question, and this is just a purely fun question that Urooj and I wanted to know more about. But you lived in Indonesia and Korea for a while, and we were kind of wondering what your experience was living in Asia. What did you learn, and how did that period of your life impact your work in the United States?
Well, I studied Spanish in high school and German in college, and I never could save enough to travel outside the US. So then I found out I could, as a GS9, make a whole lot more money. And I wanted to go to Germany because they had very large bases there. I found that out. Well, so I applied, I got qualified, and they said, oh, we don't have any openings in Germany because everybody wants to go. They have wait lists. But if you work for a year in Korea, you can then transfer. So that was my goal. I was going to go to Korea. I knew hardly anything other than the Korean War. That was all I knew about Korea, and the pictures you saw of war, which was horrible. Um, so I signed up for a 1 year tour. Well, not only did I get all this money as a GS9, it was a whole lot more than I made, as a librarian in New Orleans. I got hardship pay because it was not some place that people wanted to go. But also I got free housing and my meals in the officers club, which was like a shack. It really wasn't a fancy officers club like we have in the U.S. But I paid 10 cents for breakfast, 25 cents for lunch, and 50 cents for dinner. So I had almost no expenses. And then I was a GS9, so I could hop flights to go different places. So from Korea, I spent 3 different times in Japan. I went to the Philippines, Hong Kong, Singapore, all these different places that I would never have gone to otherwise. But I knew nothing about Korea, but it was the most interesting place. It was a fabulous experience. I traveled all over, including I went to the DMZ because they had a tiny post up there, and so I got to see the DMZ, which on both sides you have opposing forces patrolling with their guns. I have to tell you though, well, let me just talk about the library was located in a rec center. It was a recreation center. And so it was in a small town, very poor, dirt streets, one paved highway, dog carcasses carcasses of dogs without the skin hanging in butcher shops like we would see in a chicken place or in the old days. I don't even think they have those anymore here. Honey buckets with human manure, which was used to fertilize fields. And then in the rec center, there was a service club, a gym, a football field, a bowling alley, and a PX. So a lot of people came and went there, so they could easily come to the library when needed. But we also had the bookmobile that went out to all these far-reaching places. But I found it was very backward in many of the rural areas and small towns. But Seoul was a big city, but everywhere you went, the people were really lovely and kind. And Koreans are not, I always, you hear these stereotypes of the stoic Asian. Koreans were very emotional. I would go into we had the bookmobile driver, the janitor, and one of the clerks were all natives. They all spoke English. but sometimes I would go into the room where the staff was and ask a question, and they'd go, like, how do I answer that or something? But they were very emotional people, but they showed their emotions. They weren't stoic like a lot of Asians. We have that stereotype. The language was difficult. I tried learning it, uh, and I could get by on the street with it, but that was about all. Uh, and then we had a lady who came in and cleaned our dorm, our billets, the women's billets, and so she would teach me words. Well, then I had met this doctor when I had worked at the Tulane Medical School Library, and so I looked him up, and so I tried some of my Korean with him, and he said, "Oh, it's gutter Korean. Where did you learn that?" So I was careful how I used that. Um, and one of the staff had a wedding in his family, a big, lavish, expensive wedding, and so we got to go to that and meet the people. It was lovely. Um, there's something about being in a foreign country and trying to learn about other people. There's no way else you can do that. I'm a big reader. I read things, and I had before that I had read many things. But it's just wonderful to interact, and you do learn that there are stereotypes that are not so. Um, After that first year in Korea, I had intended to go to Germany because they said I could transfer with the experience. But because I saved so much money, I went to grad school and got my master's in library science. And then from there, I ended up going to work in Hawaii. And so I never got to Germany until years later when we did travel there. I think that's all for that one. Oh, Indonesia, I didn't get to there. Well, that's an interesting thing too. So that we went to Indonesia in 1979. We were living in Honolulu. I was married to Jerry then, and he was teaching a class at the University of Hawaii. And the professors there said, "We can beat out MIT and Harvard for a grant from the UN because the qualifications read just like your resume." So he arranged to get a leave that he found out he could get a leave if they got that. So sure enough, they beat out all those big Ivy League schools and got the grant. And we went to Indonesia with the idea of staying approximately a year. But he agreed to do it because they needed his qualifications. And then when they got somebody else to replace him, we would leave. So we ended up spending 9 months there. So Jerry was the head of the computer department for the city and county of Honolulu. And what he was going to do is go to Indonesia. They had this beautiful computer department, but nobody knew how to use it. So he had to get it up and going where they could use it. It was challenging because our son at that point was 5. And everywhere we went, people wanted to give him food. And, bottled water was hard to get. We had to boil our water and then take bottles with us wherever we went because you couldn't eat food or drink water that you got off the streets from the people who were selling it. And in some ways, the pandemic reminds me a little bit of living in Indonesia with our concern about germs. Uh, our neighbors had several children who played with Terrence, and they spoke English. The father was a journalist, and so he and his wife were bilingual. But everybody wanted to practice with us. But Terrence, by the time we left, he was fluent. He could speak without an accent. So some of our native friends told us. I went to the local market and I had to haggle over the food. And Jerry went with me once and he said, "Oh, pay the price." I said, "Are you crazy? I would never have respect here when I go back if we just pay the exorbitant amount they're asking." It was compared to our prices, they were really low. But you have to do the way they do or they don't respect you. Foolish tourists. And we did go to a number of places, including Yogyakarta and Bali, both of which were really interesting, as well as Malaysia and Singapore, during that time that we were there. Again, the people were much more emotional than we expected. In Indonesian I thought was slightly easier than Korean, but it's really hard to learn a language in a short period of time. And especially because everybody who speaks English wants to practice with you. They don't want to speak their language. And I guess that's all of that. But both were fascinating experiences and invaluable.
That's awesome. Just hearing about all that makes me want to go on Asia trip, but can't because pandemic and money. But I really appreciate hearing about all of those experiences. Um, so that was our list of prepared questions, and we have gotten through them. So thank you so much for answering those in so much detail.
Wait, I
Um,
have another one you didn't ask me. That thing about college age students and voting.
college students and
What
voting.
advice would you give to college age students in terms of voting?
Oh, I think we might have not added it to this document. It's okay. Yeah. So, what advice do you have
Oh,
for college age?
I have plenty, but I'll be brief. But what I wrote on my notes here, vote in large letters, vote, vote, vote. You know, as I told you, I'm involved with the League of Women Voters, and one of the things we used to do was go to your school and register voters. And a lot of young people were not interested unless somebody was running for president. They didn't want to sign up. And then, of course, they always wanted to know who we were voting for. Well, when we are doing something like that with the public, we cannot tell who we are voting for, or because the league does not support any candidates. They offer candidate forums and things like that, but they don't support candidates. They do take positions on ballot measures. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about. But because you want to educate yourself about what you're voting on. But even if you don't have time or you don't want to, if you go vote for president only or governor only or whatever's on the top of the ballot. But think about it. I was horrified when I moved to California. We were in San Diego and I'd read all the propositions on the ballot measures and I think, oh my God, how do you understand this and how do you know how to vote on it? And a lot of times I just couldn't because I didn't have an opinion. I didn't understand what it was about, really. Um, so, another thing, the advice for you, though, is to educate the issues and what the proposed solutions mean. And it's not easy. Don't rely only on the TV or the internet for all your information because you can't tell which ones are prejudiced or incorrect. Try to learn who the experts are regarding particular issues. Also, try to find out what the motives of both sides are about candidates or proposed laws. I've always voted, but as I said, when I moved here, it was terrible with these propositions. The reason I became involved with the League is I read in 2006, I read in the local Fullerton paper, it was a tiny article, but that there was going to be this pros and cons presentation by the League of Women Voters at a luncheon. And it was free, but you had to buy lunch. Um, I was thrilled to hear the explanations. Very simple, objective, and they said what each measure meant, who supported it, and who opposed it. They don't you know, advise you in any way. Occasionally, the state league or the national league will take a position on something like that, but unless they do, we never get into that with it. But it was so much easier. So I immediately joined the league and they put me immediately on a committee because they were having a forum for judges and lawyers and they didn't know anybody to invite. Anyway, and then I always attend the pros and cons. Usually we do it with one of our local, we have luncheons periodically and we do it at a luncheon where the public is invited. And last year, though, what they did is they did it at OLLI, the Ocean Lifelong Learning Institute at Cal State Fullerton. And it was filmed and shown on TV. And so they thought, oh my gosh, this is so much easier than putting these on for every city. The League of Women Voters that I'm in, this branch serves 8 cities. So we sometimes have 5 or 6 of them or different groups will ask you as, churches or others ask you to come and do that. But I think now what we're going to try to do is film it. And it was filmed and shown on TV. Uh, they also did a candidate forum in Fullerton, which the city, and I think they did it in several other cities, but because I live in Fullerton, I'm more aware of theirs. They showed they showed it on the city's channel. There's a TV channel. I don't know if you know. I'm not even sure how to get it on. My husband does all that with the TV. But anyway, so it got so much more coverage than normally, where you'd have to go to the city hall and be in the audience there. Okay, so all of you need to vote. We want to hear your voices. Young people need to be heard, because what happens is more of my age group, senior citizens, have much more influence than the numbers. I wish I could be there. Someday you have to invite me back when I can see all of you, though. It really is different. I'm much more formal in some ways, but I most often talk to seniors, because one of the big things is scams that target the elderly. They like to be called senior citizens. Um, I mean, they're just awful, and a lot of people get taken in, get all these offers on the phone or whatever, and get taken advantage of.
Yeah, that's really sad to know about that. So many people, take advantage of seniors like that.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you being there for helping them and
I want to say one
advocating.
thing. Speaking of that, the last time I spoke at the senior center in Fullerton, a woman who was definitely not a senior, she may have been in her 40s perhaps. I couldn't tell. She was youthful looking, though. She wasn't definitely not a senior citizen. She sat through the whole presentation about scams targeting seniors. And she came up afterwards and said, I had this friend on the internet, and his wife needed surgery, and I sent him $5,000. I wired it, and then I found out that the check went through at a car rental place in New York. And I said, honey, there's nothing, you should never have done that. You don't know who you were talking to, and there's nothing the police can do here. And you can't get anything done in New York. And I mean, but to me, and she was a much younger person and not having any issues with health or mentally. And I just was amazed at somebody, and it was her life savings. It wasn't like she was rich.
That's really sad to know about, that people do things like that. It's just, yeah, that's just really awful.
So how many do we have on? I'm big on my screen, and I can just see some of you around the edges.
Right, that's because I spotlighted you so everybody can see you. We have a total of 21 participants at the moment, I believe. Yeah. So, and we are getting audience questions. So should we get started with that?
Good.
Yeah, so that was what we just went over were our list of prepared questions. And so if anybody in the audience has any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat, or you could unmute yourself by raising your hand first. But I already have a couple here, so let me find it. I think it got lost in the chat. Jessica, I believe, has a question about your experience being a librarian. Just trying to scroll. Okay, right here. What made you decide to be a librarian? What are the requirements to work in a library, and what are the benefits of working in a library? So that's 3 different questions in one.
Oh, okay. I was always an avid reader, and because my parents had so little education, I had to learn a lot through reading about things. That's how I found out women had careers. You didn't have to have all those children. I think I told you I can finally convince my father, what if no one ever married me? And so I think they thought, okay, they will let her go to college so we won't have to take care of her just in case. Because I was kind of backward. I didn't date much in high school. I maybe had 3 dates the whole time. And I did blossom more in college, but not that much. A lot of girls, especially the rich girls whose fathers had oil wells in their backyard in Texas, they'd send their daughters to LSU to find husbands. And I couldn't get over such a frivolous reason to go to college. But anyway, I lost track of where I was now. So I wanted to go to college, and I finally got them to allow me to go. And in junior high school and high school, I was a volunteer see, I started volunteering at a young age. I was a volunteer in the library on my 2 study halls each week. And, and then I got an award at the end, and I was voted the most helpful in my high school class, even though I was very shy. um, but that's what I wanted to be. I didn't see myself being a school teacher, and there weren't many things that I thought that I could do, study to be. Lawyer would have been the last thing on my list. I think I would have tried for a doctor before a lawyer because I was really shy. By the way, I haven't had lunch and I haven't had water in a while. And when you're a senior citizen, it affects your memory. I'm starting to get a little fuzzy headed here. Okay, the librarian. I loved being a librarian. I never would have changed if I could have gotten a full-time job in San Diego. I worked in various libraries. Usually it had to do with somebody would come and say, oh, we have this opening. When I first started, there was a shortage of librarians. So I didn't have a master's degree. I just had my teaching credential and my minor in library science. But I was working in a school, and somebody from the Tulane Medical School invited me to come and work in their library. They offered me a job, almost sight unseen. But, I was a good student, so everybody wrote glowing letters for me. And it was more money, and then I didn't have to find another job in the summertime, whereas when you work in schools, then you have to do something in the summer as well, and at low pay too. So I did that. That's where I met the doctor from Korea. Then eventually he went back, and then I looked him up when I was there and got invited to weddings and all kinds of parties. The best job, I guess, that I had in Hawaii was I managed 2 libraries, an elementary school library and a 8th grade through 12th grade library in the upper school, they called it. It was a private school. And again, that paid a little bit more than the job I had before. So I always got a raise to go to these different jobs. And I enjoyed it very much. I never would have changed if I could have gotten a full-time job when we moved to California. I'm a helper. I tried to be mother's helper when I was a kid, but she had so many so close together, it was really hard to be actually helpful. I did when I was in high school and even in junior high school. I would watch the younger ones while my mother cooked dinner every day and that kind of thing, but I really wasn't that much help. But I started babysitting outside the home when I was 10 years old because I got paid to do that. Library jobs. You really have to have a library science degree, a master's degree in library science to get the best jobs to run the library. And I like to be in charge, so it was easier to do that than to be an assistant or helper. But there are other jobs, library clerks, and I think that, now in the schools in California that they don't have credentialed librarians. They have people who maybe have had a little bit of some classes, but they don't have a master's degree, and it might be possible to get those jobs. But they always often have part-time jobs, like at universities and other places, big public libraries, for clerks. And students file, but that's the hardest job to have when you're a student and you shelve the books. It's boring, but I used to just find good things to read. I always found a positive about everything I did. The person who asked the question, do they feel satisfied with that answer?
Jessica, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. I really appreciate your response. Thank you.
So I'll give you my phone number and my email. Anybody out there, don't inundate me, but if you have a question or something you want to ask me or me to refer you to, my email is my name, Pearl, Pearlg, Mann, Mann, at AOL.com. I know it's old. I have a Gmail, but I don't know how to access it. My husband comes and does everything with my computers. And then my phone number. This is my office number. And I'm not always here because I've downsized a lot with the pandemic. I'm careful about who I see. You know, I do take some new clients, but I'm careful. Uh, I'm in that age group, you know. I got my one shot, and I think tomorrow, no, next week I'm getting the next one. Anyway, 714-992-4045. Okay, so next question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you first for sharing your phone number and email. That's fantastic, and I think a lot of us will really appreciate the chance to talk with you, just because like you have so much experience. So I really appreciate like you making yourself available for all of us as students. That's really fantastic, and I don't think a lot of people would want to do that. So thank you. The next question that we received was, what do you enjoy most about Fullerton when it comes to your work, such as volunteering and being involved in the community?
Well, I think I mentioned before, a lot of my clients are the millionaires next door, and most of my clients are from Fullerton and some of the, you know, Placentia, Yorba Linda, all around this area. Although those people refer their relatives, I have people in South County and, you know, other places where they've referred them. Well, Fullerton has really changed since we first moved here. The reason my husband's job was in Fullerton, but the reason we moved into Fullerton itself, we could have, you know, been somewhere else around the area. A person my husband worked with in the computer field, he worked somewhere else, but his wife was a school teacher, and so we asked about the schools because Terrence was in third grade, middle of third grade when we moved, and very bright. He was in Gate and so forth, and the gal said, "Oh, you want to live in Irvine or Fullerton? They have the best schools in Orange County." I still don't know if that's really true, and I think there are probably good schools in almost every city. But because of that, we definitely wanted to be in Fullerton, and it was closer to Jerry's work, so he didn't have a long commute anyway. And so he went all through from third grade on. He went all the way through. He graduated from Sunny Hills, and he went to Harvard. So, you know, they proved to be good. And we paid. We didn't qualify for it. My husband actually lost his job after Terrence had sent out his. So his backup school was Cal Berkeley, and so we thought he would end up there, which was my husband's alma mater. But Jerry got a job a month before Terrence had to send in the card, and so he decided to go to Harvard. I think more because it was far away than anything. You know, he was ready to get away and try something new. It was an experience for all of us, though, him included. He would call us every Sunday night and he said, "Mom, I can't get over how all these rich kids, they talk about how jealous they are that my parents were always there. Their parents would go skiing in Europe at Christmas and leave them with the nannies, and their parents weren't interested in them." And because he always complained how, you know, we were strict compared to others. And to us, we both had, Jerry and I both had very, very strict parents. Our parents wouldn't, I mean, it was nothing like that. I mean, in my family, the girls could not go anywhere at night. I joined the band so I could go to football games on Friday night. And I'm tone deaf, so I would have been valedictorian otherwise. But I mean, I passed, but you know, it's funny.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering that. I believe we have another person who has a question. Is it Grant?
Yeah. What do students thinking about a law career need to know? Or do you have any do you have any advice for students thinking about having a law career or going into politics?
Politics?
Yes, or law. I'm considering both.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, I think law school is a good choice. I think you can do lots of other things. I know a lot of lawyers who, you know, younger men as well as women, who started out doing one thing and they went like in-house counsel. Actually, that's what my son is doing. He's a lawyer, and he worked in a big firm, I mean, he missed weddings and he would go, somebody would come in on Friday and say, I need this on Monday, a senior partner. And he was on the new level, lowest level. He'd have to stay. I mean, he missed my niece's wedding, all kinds of things, because we had to go back to New Orleans for those, so he couldn't travel with us. And then he worked for the U.S. Attorney's Office, and he was a great litigator. But it was really hard. He now has 2 young children. So he now works for the South Coast Air Quality Management District. He's not a lawyer, but he runs the code enforcement section. And he's really liking the challenge of being a manager. So what I'm saying is, even if you decide you don't want to practice law, there are lots of things you can do it. And there's so many different options for lawyers. Like many lawyers just work in offices, do research and writing, and I thought when I went to law school, that's probably what I would be doing, because I wasn't shy like I had previously been when I graduated from high school, but I still did not think I was the greatest speaker in the world. I'm still not, but I know how to get my point across, and that's the main thing at this point. And I think it's a great background to have if you want to be a politician, because if you're going to make laws, you might as well know a lot about the law.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know, I also am interested in going into politics or law, so your input is super helpful. Oh, okay. So I was gonna ask. Okay, I'll ask the question that just appeared in the chat. Katarina is asking, what advice could you share for women in leadership positions?
Always have your kitchen cabinet or whatever, somebody that you can count on to give you good advice and be honest. I think that's important. One of the things that made my husband, I'm thinking about him, he was a manager of big departments, but he was always careful. He wasn't domineering. And a lot of people who are in those kinds of petitions, it's my way, or the highway and so forth. You want to get feedback from the lower level people about what needs to be done and how to do it. And that's how I've run things too. When I've been chairing something, you always have the board that you meet with and run things by and get a consensus so everybody's behind it, because you don't want to consent to doing something and then find nobody who's willing to volunteer to help. I don't know how helpful that is. Like I said, I only ever ran for things when somebody asked me to do it.
Katarina, I hope that was helpful. I know, for me, I've taken a couple of leadership roles at Fullerton College, and I definitely understand that, being kind of no one else running and then wanting to be in charge and ending up in leadership roles. So I understand how that ends up happening. I hope, Katarina, that was helpful. Okay, fantastic. All right, so that appears to be the questions that I've received either privately or in the chat. This is kind of a last call for questions, so if anyone has something they would like to ask, please send it now or forever hold your peace. Okay, so I'll let you guys think about that, but while we wait for any last questions, I just wanted to share the information for the League of Women Voters. So first, I'm gonna put the link to join the League of Women Voters in North Orange County in the chat. So if you click on this, there is a form to fill out that will allow you to be part of the League of Women Voters, which I think is a fantastic opportunity to be more involved in the civic nature of Orange County and really making sure that you're part of that election process, which I think is really important for young people. So
may I say something about that quickly? Yes, and it's free. Membership for students is free, so you don't have to pay anything, but it's also a good source of information. We have a newsletter, and that gets posted. We have a website, and you can find out information about candidate forums and those kinds of things, prior to elections that are helpful in voting. So yes, I encourage you. We need more students.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too that the information part is really important. You're entirely right that it's really challenging to kind of learn what is happening with all the candidates and propositions, especially in California. So being part of this is a really great way to get that information from people who are credible and are doing the research, right? So if you are able to, it's free. I highly recommend it. Please sign up if you would like to. And then I'm just gonna put the, oh, we have one more question. Okay, I'll ask the question, but first I just want to put the overall League of Women Voters link in the chat, just in case you're not in one of the counties covered by the North Orange County community or the North Orange County League of Women Voters. So you can find your county with this website. That way you also have the chance to sign up. Okay, and then we'll ask the very last question, and then I think that will be it for today. So the last question that we have in the chat is, do you have recommendations to get more involved in my community with COVID present?
Oh, that's a tough one. It's really hard now to find information. I'm not sure what kind of community involvement. I would say probably start at your school first if you can, because you would have more chances to find out what's going there. I'm thinking the school posts things. You know, a good person to ask, by the way, I have to commend all of you. If you've had Jody Balma, you know what a wonderful person she is, and top notch, very bright and very helpful to us. She's not on the board, but she has a position. She's our student liaison. But I would think you could ask her. She probably has some ideas because, you know, we became aware of you guys because some of her students would volunteer when we would have the candidate forums. They would hand out brochures and things to people who came, and they would help us in other ways, greeters and so forth. And luncheons as well. They would attend those and do things to help us. So, and there might be things when, the problem is with the pandemic, this is how I have my board meetings with the league. And this is how we don't have luncheons, but occasionally we'll have a speaker. And, we do it on Zoom with all as many members as we can get on. We'll have our annual meeting with all 90 of our members. Well, not all of them have access for one thing, but many of them will be on that for our annual meeting. And we don't know how long it's going to last, but I don't know what's really available because you don't meet anywhere. But I would think things like research you might be able to do on your own, and somebody at the college might need help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know if you're interested in research, like you can work with the library. I know that they have a lot of people who will help you research stuff. But I want to emphasize the Jody Balma thing. Absolutely. She is an amazing political science professor. She'll get you hooked up on something fun to do. I know once I started in her class, she had all these suggestions for me to do and to work on. So I would absolutely recommend getting in contact with her. Oh yeah, Joe, I'll defer to you.
Well, and I don't know if you know this, but Jody was just named yesterday as our Faculty of the Year.
Oh,
so
how exciting!
Just to congratulate Jody here as well.
Oh my goodness, yes. I don't know if she's on, but she's very busy.
That's
wow.
Yay!
So what does Joe do? What do you do, Joe?
I'm a professor of English, but I'm also the faculty advisor to associated students.
Oh, okay.
So I get to work with all of these students you're seeing across the top of your screen.
Oh, how wonderful.
It is
but
wonderful.
I could see ASFA, so that's why I was curious.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I'll take the spotlight off so you can see everybody else in the room as well. Should I do that?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would be fun. Oh my goodness, now you're huge. Beautiful.
So, oh yeah, Jody's here too. Like, also we are all Jody students as well, both Madison and me, and a lot of other students who are in this Zoom room right now.
But all I see, you're now where I was, and I'm up there with the rest of you, and I just see that same line. Somebody new though up there.
If you click on the top grid, it will allow you to put it into gallery view, and that way you can see
gallery view. Okay, wait, I don't see that.
It's on the top right.
Oh, the right. Okay, wait. Oh, view. Okay. Aha. Thank you. I learned something new. Oh, and I see some people who look familiar to me. I've seen, and Jody, that's a picture of you. Congratulations. Are you in your pajamas? You know, actually, sometimes when I had 3 court appearances last week, and I wore the things I wear when I go to the gym on the bottom, and I had my jacket on like this. But today I thought I'm going to have to talk to all these students, so I actually have the suit pants on too, because it's the way I feel, not not the way I look so much. Anyway. So nice to see, and a beautiful black kitty cat, and a lot of you, I see your names. Are they on the phone, or are they on just, they don't have the camera?
Yeah, they're to the call, but they don't have their camera turned on. So you have the option of turning your camera off. I think that's for maybe if like they don't want to be on the recording, or sometimes it's just more comfortable to be with your camera off. So.
And I'm going to imagine what they're wearing or not wearing.
Yeah.
Anyway, but you know, it's really interesting though to see. Oh, and this is a beautiful background you have. I lost my thought there. I have to go eat lunch.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think we're done with all of the questions from people here. So I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak with us. This has been amazing. Like on a personal level, I've learned a ton from you. I was really excited to speak with you today, and it's been incredible. So I want to thank you for attending and for speaking with us. I know you have a really busy schedule, and I don't want you to keep you from your lunch. So thank you for coming. I'm going to stay if anyone has any questions or things they want to talk about afterward, but otherwise,
okay, if you can set, what is this? Such a good job. Oh, how sweet. Thank you. There was another little message here. Little messages keep coming up. People, I guess it's questions from people. There was another little message here, okay, well, anyway, well, thank you. I was very flattered that you asked me. You know, there are probably a lot more famous people you could have asked, women who have done great things in the community. But, and I hope it wasn't too casual. You know, it really is hard to be more formal. I would like to have been so you can see how tall I am. I used to be 5'11", but I'm now 5'10". I'm shrinking, but you know, I'm not hunched. My doctor thinks I'm a poster child for aging, which I thought was a funny thing to say. I don't take any meds, so, and I'm 82 years old, so I'm ancient.
Well, 5'10" is still super tall. I'm 5'3", so I'm very short, which is less fun.
Yeah, same
but
here.
Good things come in small packages.
I repeat that to myself regularly, so I feel better about being short.
You as well, so.
Okay. Well, okay, so that was perfect. And no, it definitely wasn't too informal. I think that was kind of perfect for this setting. And for those of us here, it honestly was really relaxed. And I think it was easier for people to ask questions and to feel comfortable in this environment. So it definitely wasn't too informal, not even a little bit. Okay, so I think that Urooj, did you want to say something? I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to say that we definitely wanted to have you and not somebody who's like a celebrity famous, because we wanted somebody who has been doing some great work in Fullerton locally, and we wanted somebody that can inspire us and motivate us, and you were the perfect one for this job. And I really want to thank Professor Jody Balma for referencing us to you and getting us in contact.
I just thought of something. They wanted to know what I did in Fullerton. I was on the board of trustees for the library for 3 or 4 years, and I was the only woman appointed to the Fullerton Infrastructure Committee. So it was a very interesting experience, because they, you know, we'd go out and inspect highways and alleyways and whatever, because we had to make some policy. But so, you know, I did find time to do that as much as I could, but the league is taking up a lot of my time now. So that, and I'm also involved with the legal aid, so I'm not taking individual cases now, because I'm helping them with all kinds of policy and so forth. But anyway, it was lovely speaking to you. And like I said, if you have a question that you think I can answer, let me know.
Yes, thank you so much for that. All of this brilliant advice and experience you shared with us. And again, just one last time, I want to plug League of Women Voters. We have put the form link in the chat. The form is fairly simple. You print it out, fill it in, mail it, which I'm still procrastinating on because I don't have a printer and I don't have stamps. So need to get both of those things to do that.
Oh, yeah, that's important.
Yeah, so definitely try and get that form in, join for free because students have free membership, and you will see both the lawyer and Professor Bala present here at the League of Women Voters. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We all hope you had fun today. The recording will be up on YouTube later today, so if you need access on that.
Oh, how embarrassing for me.
It's a great resource for
I felt like I was talking right here to you guys.
It's great institutional knowledge we all are going to be using on our AS website. Professor, are you going to say something?
Yeah. I was just going to say, you know, Pearl, they're just going to share it with students. I promise you it won't go viral.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yes, it's just for college students.
Well, it's a good thing you didn't get me talking on race. You know, I think that's one reason the background living in a society that was so segregated. That's why I wanted to be in California rather than Louisiana. I could never live there again. Although it's better, but not great.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you
everyone.
so much for coming in. And thanks to Madison and Urooj. You guys did a lot of hard work and incredible turnout for Friday. Thank you.
And thank you for those questions. They were really good. I've been thinking about a lot of them because, you know, I had to go back in the past. Why did I do that? A lot of it I never thought about why. You know, it was just that, oh, this came up and I volunteered.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for answering all of them. And again, just to echo what Jody said, thank you everyone for coming. I don't want to take up too much of anyone's time, so feel free to go back to all of your fun homework or other obligations. But thank you for joining us today. It was wonderful to see all of you. And I hope you guys learned something.
Yeah, take care.